My mom would always say, you can't argue with stupid. Hey Gaspers, welcome back to Gasp, the podcast. I'm just making sure I'm recording. The gays, the girls, and especially the gay girls. I'm in a different chair today for anyone who's watching on video. And also I made like a little makeshift computer stand with my laundry basket because I had to get rid of some things. Why, do you ask? Do I have to get rid of some things? It's because I'm moving. And first, this is a very exciting episode I'm about to get into. Very excited about it, but I wanted to let you guys know this is the last episode that I will be doing. Feel very bittersweet about it. Not ever, sorry. Here in New York, in my apartment at this little makeshift home studio. And yeah, I'm sad about it, but I am so excited because I'm moving to DC. I'm moving in with my girlfriend, Sophia. Thank God, it's been a long time coming. We're going to be looking for apartments. So like in that meantime, I'm going to be like at her apartment and like at my parents' house back and forth for like the next month or so. And then we'll be moving in soon. So don't worry, the episodes are not ending. I'm just going to be like probably recording at my parents' house with my dog Sneakers or maybe in Sophia's apartment until we get ourselves resituated at another home studio in me and Sophia's future apartment. So I'm really excited about that. So everyone say goodbye to this set. Let me know if you have any ideas of a future set because I'll have some time to like think of how to make it really cutesy and awesome. But I'm going to miss this brick wall. I feel like I've made so many TikToks in front of this brick wall, so I'm really gonna miss it. I'm drinking this like mixture of a pineapple and ginger juice because I went out with some friends a few nights ago to celebrate like my last night out in New York. I literally move in like 3 days. And one of my friends was like, oh, I'm recovering getting sick. And I was like, so true. So now I'm really anxious that I'm gonna get sick. Not that it would really matter, but I just don't want to be sick when I'm moving out. So I'm drinking a ginger juice. Let's see if that'll do anything for me. All right, let's get into the topic of today. This is the episode for when you are in an argument online or in person, right? About speculating on sexuality. This is the episode for you. Okay. I have had a lot of requests on tips like when you're in an argument or like what to say when someone says this and blank blank blank. So this is going to be the deep dive into this phrase that has come up so much in the last few years, and really I can't really find another time in history where it's been used so much. I feel like it was used and created by people to shut down queer people from talking. That's my opinion. But we're talking about the phrase speculating on sexuality. Let's dive into what that means and when it's okay to speculate on sexuality, why I think it's okay to speculate on sexuality, and all these different arguments that people kind of use to kind of silence queer people. And I really think it's important to talk about, like, we are in a bad time in America and globally, okay? There's a lot of war going on, and there's a lot of fascist movements that are becoming very popular, and this like revenge against the minority. It is so important now, literally more than ever, to be talking when we have the ability to about human rights. And I'm never going to shut up about gay people. And it's so, so important that we don't censor each other and also personally censor ourselves because we're worried that someone's going to be like, oh, you shouldn't say that. Okay. This is the time to be loud and to be talking about gay rights, Black rights, trans rights, women's rights, human rights. What else? Every right, right? Immigrant rights. Okay. This is the time to be talking about it. And a lot of people think like, oh, when it comes down to pop culture, that's like so irrelevant. Pop culture shapes opinions around the world, okay? Especially American pop culture. American celebrities are popular around the world. So it is extremely important to include like LGBTQ takes on pop culture and to remind people, because these influential celebrities could be gay, and that will help to desensitize queer rights around the world, in my opinion. Okay, really quickly before we get into the meat of the topic, for those who didn't see already, I actually made a bonus episode this week, and it is this new series I created called On the Rumor Mill. So On the Rumor Mill is pretty much a series I do. I think I'm going to do it like bi-weekly, maybe every week depending on my mood, where I talk about rumors, like pop culture rumors, celebrity rumors, even news rumors, and I give my 2 cents on them. And these are rumors that I can't fit into like my daily episodes, right? So this last episode that I did, I talked about Kendall Jenner being bi, apparently. This rumor that Barack Obama is having an affair with Jennifer Aniston. The rumor that Sabrina Carpenter and Billie Eilish are together. I rate them on a scale of true or false, based on literally just my opinion. I like this series because I can fit in things that I literally wouldn't be able to fit in my daily episodes. You will only be able to access that on Patreon if you're #1 Gasper. I will never post that anywhere else. That's why when you're a subscription member, I'm going to give you bonus episodes. This is for people who want more content, and I'm delivering, okay? Join as a #1 Gasper. You will be able to access that because, again, I will never post it anywhere else. The only other place I will post it is Spotify subscription member. So it's kind of the same thing as a Patreon #1 Gasper. If you will become a subscription member on Spotify, which I think I had to submit like my business records or whatever to get that approved, and I think it will be shortly. I will post those bonus episodes there on Spotify. So that's the update on Patreon. Again, I will put that link in the show notes and in the link in my bio. And also, I do still have merch available. So go check that out. I'm going to make a Pride merch line. My mom actually came up with this idea. I think is very smart to do Pride merch. So I'm excited about that. Speaking of Patreon, if you join as a #1 Gasper, I actually will shout out members each week. So this week, I want to shout out my #1 Gasper, Olivia B. Thank you so much for being a subscription member and becoming a #1 Gasper. You're the best. Let's talk about this topic. What are we going to cover when it comes to this episode? We're going to cover literally what is speculating on sexuality. We're going to cover outing and how it's not speculating on sexuality. That's the #1 thing I feel like I get on the internet, and I feel like a lot of people are confused by stereotypes, queer flagging, why and when it's okay to speculate on sexuality, and then also why speculating is important, I believe, and how to respond when someone says don't speculate. Okay, so if you guys are my internet warriors, which is important, okay? Discourse is important. If someone's battering you in a comment section or in some kind of like online discourse, it's okay to just stop replying. I find this too, especially when I know that I'm right about something and someone is being, discriminatory. I feel the need to keep replying because I know I have a counterpoint, but also you don't have to waste your energy, right? So pick and choose your battles. There is just so much internet discourse on this topic, and specifically over the last 2 years, I tried to find the first time this phrase was used. I can't. But it's mostly been used in the last few years, I think, based around this kind of discourse of Gaylor. Let's get into the first thing. Okay, what is speculating on sexuality? First of all, it's a relatively new phrase that has no real historical meaning. There is going to be no feminist or major queer theorist or author or politician that is talking about speculating on sexuality. And more importantly, which I will get into because I'm going to bring fucking receipts, I bring up the top names in LGBTQ theory. Okay, and I'll tell you why, according to their words, we should be speculating on sexuality. Because there's no queer activist that's stop talking about gay things. No one is gonna say that. All right, it's only the people that are trying to shut down these conversations that say that, either because they're holding on to a straight narrative and they're straight, or, and I find, and this is really tough, but people who've been out on themselves. And that is a horrible experience, but it's important to remind people of the distinction between outing and speculating, because a queer person speculating on someone's sexuality is not the same as someone being outed. But I do find that usually this phrase speculating on sexuality is used very negatively, right? A negative connotation used against queer people. And we have to discuss what it is, because if this is apparently a new phrase, let's use it and let's reframe it and co-opt it as our own, okay? Okay, what is it not? It is not outing someone, and it is not an accusation, okay? Saying someone is gay is not an insult. It can be used as an insult, but in the same way where TikTok like reports anyone for saying gay, we can't over censor these words that have been used as slurs, because over censoring makes homophobes win. Okay, we have to reclaim the language, use the language, not be scared to use the language, and then slowly over time, it removes the negative connotation. If we are scared to use our own language, you're operating for the oppressor. Saying someone is gay is not an inherently derogatory thing. I say it all the time on the internet. I have to say it a million times. If you are saying gay is an insult, the issue lies with the homophobe, not the word itself or the action of saying that, right? What is speculating on sexuality? Speculating on sexuality is talking about the potential of someone being queer, the potential, because we do not know. That's why it's not outing. The potential of someone leading a queer life or including queer themes in their work in general, art or personal expression, right? Queer is different than a specific label or identity. Now, we may think, okay, wait, maybe this person is bi, maybe this person is whatever. But largely when we are speculating on sexuality, it's more so queer people picking up on largely queer themes. What does queer mean? It is not a specific identity, though it can be used to be, but it's also largely an inherently political identity of this push against a heteronormative world. Right? So queer, when we say someone could be queer, it's not even necessarily saying that that person like that's their exact identity, right? We're picking up on this push against a heterosexual and gender norm. Let's get into the biggest part of this whole episode, which is outing versus speculating. I get this all the time. And if I don't address, a specific thing that you guys get all the time, or maybe something that you want me to talk about, let me know. I'm happy to make a part 2 or specific things and how to respond to specific phrases, right? But a lot of times people say either it's outing or that's just weird. Don't be creepy. Don't be obsessive. Okay. I fall victim to replying to a lot of those comments just because I think it's important to have discourse, and I'm very firm on what I know and what I believe. Education and knowledge gives you power. I'm not going to be self-conscious about what I say on the internet because I know what I believe and what I stand for, and I have education to back that up, right? But you also don't have to get into these conversations. If someone calls you weird and obsessive, that is rooted literally in homophobia, okay? It is rooted in this, you're being an outcast, you're weirder than everyone else, that's obsessive, that's creepy, it's gross. Those are loaded homophobic words, even if they are queer and even if they don't think that they're being homophobic, period. The other thing I get a lot is you're gonna out someone, you're outing someone, right? Let's get into that, okay? What is outing? Outing is to out someone. This is a definition from HRC. It means to, quote, expose someone's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or gender non-binary identity to others without their permission. That means you are exposing someone's identity. If you do not know a person's identity, you can't out them because you can't expose what you don't know. And I'll get into situations where I think it's not okay to speculate, but those are very few situations. Speculating is not outing. And because of the mere definition of both of these phrases, right? The definition of the word speculate is to form a theory or conjecture about a subject without firm evidence. This is from Oxford, right? It is impossible to out someone by speculating on their sexuality because you have to know that person's identity. And as the definition says, it is without evidence, like firm evidence. We don't know, for example, Taylor Swift's actual sexuality. We can make theories, we can wonder, we can be like, wow, that looks really queer because she's writing about women, she's talking about queer themes, she's queer flagging, all these things. That's not outing her because no one told me her personal information. I don't actually know her sexuality. I cannot out her, okay? The whole word speculate means like to speculate, to wonder, okay? To form a theory. It's quite literally not outing because, again, and I'm hammering this down so hard because a lot of people don't get it, outing is to expose it because you already know it. And we don't know Taylor Swift's sexuality. Unless for some reason you have personal knowledge, you are not outing them by saying that Cate Blanchett did something really gay. We have to stop acting like that is a dirty, gross, private, secret, bedroom word, right? Being queer and being part of the queer community is an identity. It's a community. It's a political identity, okay? So to talk about something that's LGBTQ and to censor that and to say, you can't say that, that's gross, that's creepy, that's invasive. It is literally whittling the queer community down to sexual behaviors, which is literally homophobic. That is homophobic, okay? The queer community is beyond sex. Sex is a huge part of it, but in the same way that any straight relationship does. So when we talk about queer people and you immediately think of sex, you're the weird one. When we're on the internet or we're in these kind of discourses and someone says, well, what about Kit Connor? Kit Connor from Heartstopper was outed, okay? Let's talk about it. I'm not going to shy away from these things. You give me any argument and I will fucking refute it. NBC, this is from NBC, quote, Heartstopper star Kit Connor came out as bisexual Monday, saying he felt, and this is from a few years ago, saying he felt forced to share his sexual orientation after he was accused of queer baiting by viewers of the popular Netflix show. In a rare Twitter post, the British actor wrote, quote, back for a minute, I'm bi. Congrats for forcing an 18-year-old to out himself. All right. Let's talk about that. Why is this whole situation irrelevant when it comes to speculating on sexuality? Because he came out, because he felt he had to defend himself from the accusation that he was queer baiting just by playing a queer role. That is so different from speculating on sexuality, especially when they're an actor playing, like doing something that's their job, right? He didn't write a gay song. Okay, he played a queer character. That's called acting. That is not queer baiting. Now, I do have mixed opinions about if a person can queer bait. I don't believe an actual person can queer bait, but when you are pushing a project like and intentionally using your art to your personal art to generate queer people to speculate if you are queer, I think it's possible. That is not the situation. But let me just, for example, say, Taylor Swift, if 10 years from now, she's still intentionally including queer flagging language in her lyrics, and I would never be like, she needs to come out. But if she came out as straight and she knew people were picking up on queer flagging and she was intentionally putting queer flagging in her lyrics, I think you could argue that that is queer baiting. But that is a very, very specific situation and has to do when someone is writing lyrics, this is their own personal work, and is intentionally aware that people believe that she is using queer flags, okay? That's a very specific situation. And honestly, I'm down with people to argue against that. But that is not the situation. Kit Connor was accused of queer baiting just because he was playing a queer character that's acting. Accusing someone of queer baiting is not even close to saying, oh, I wonder if he's queer because he's playing this queer character. So no one should have been saying, oh, how dare he play this queer character? Is he straight? And asking and like demanding a identity, okay? When we are talking about sexuality, should never be like, this person needs to tell us this. This person needs to come out and I need to know this person's sexuality. But we're not doing that when we speculate on sexuality, okay? Demanding and speculating, two very different things. Speculating is not demanding. It is conversation without focus on result. We are not expecting anything from Taylor Swift. We are simply enjoying her music and noting that it is queer. And if you guys can't understand the difference of those things, I know y'all can, but if other people cannot see the difference between those things, then we are in a scary world because nuance exists. So he was accused of queer baiting. And again, speculating is not an accusation. We covered that already. So that's why that situation is completely irrelevant to speculating on sexuality. He was accused of queer baiting, point blank period. So when anyone brings up that situation, you can tell them people accused him of queer baiting. It was not the speculating on sexuality. Speculating is not demanding someone come out or even asking someone to come out, okay? It is queer discourse around queer flagging, period, without expectation and without ask. Let's talk about stereotypes. When I looked up speculating on sexuality, some of these like random personal essays came out, and some of them by straight people. And I just want to make this clear. I appreciate any queer person that disagrees with me. And I'm still going to disagree with you because I do think it's rooted in our history to talk about these things out loud and to not censor. And like, I will argue with you, right? Right. I think you deserve to be in the conversation, but I'm going to disagree with you respectfully. If you are straight, you have no opinion on this. You literally have no opinion on this. You should never be telling queer people what they can and can't say. It is the exact same as me hearing a Black creator talking about anything about like Black rights or like Black Lives Matter or anything going on and saying, you can't say that. It's insane that a straight person would think that they have the ability to tell queer people what they can and can't say. If you want to be an ally, you don't have an opinion on this. You let the minority group decide what is okay and what should be allowed to say, because we know the personal experience of homophobia. That's just how the world works. And if you disagree with that, you're homophobic, period. How many times am I going to say period in this episode? All right, but let's talk about stereotypes, because when I was reading through these articles, a lot of people were saying like, oh, speculating on sexuality reduces people to stereotypes. Guys. And maybe this is just like my queer knowledge and like my background in like theory, right? That makes this so painful to even have to try to respond to, because we are trapped in the heteronormative society when we are talking about things like this. Let's go into it. Just because homophobes have used gay, lesbian, bi, trans, queer, etc. Oh my God, a crazy dog is outside. This is why I'm moving, guys, because it's so hard to record here. Just because they've used stereotypes of us in this community in order to place boxes around people, it does not mean that queer people have to live life controlled and constantly evading these stereotypes. We do not have to evade stereotypes to live a free life. In fact, actually releasing what straight people think of us from how you view yourself is full freedom. True liberation is living without the rules that the master or the privileged placed on us. So if you don't believe me, let's get into a little masterclass on queer theory. Audre Lorde, if you really want to get into Black feminist queer thought, great place to start. Truly intersectional. This is my favorite quote and very famous quote. I'm sure you've heard it. Quote, "For the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. They may allow us to temporarily beat him at his own game, but they will never enable us to bring about genuine change. We cannot rely on straight society to free us or use their language to live our lives and to define ourselves. So if we use their rules and their language and live within that in our attempt to free the queer community, it's never going to work long term. They want us to be free within their limits. So if we're only thinking about how to avoid stereotypes and living our own life, that is not liberation. Liberation is to live authentically ourselves and to not think about like, oh, am I breaking a stereotype by living this way? You living authentically yourself is inherently revolutionary. Has nothing to do with if you fit inside their mold of what they conceptualize a lesbian is or a gay man is. And if you happen to fit into a stereotype, it doesn't mean you are any less liberated. So constantly trying to avoid language that straight people find uncomfortable or they've defined as being stereotypical is not how we want to go about this movement, and it's not how we build a future. I'm like, can you guys see that I'm like pissed lately? It's because I don't know if it's like the last week or so, but there's just been a lot of like hetlers out there. So like we need to make this video and set this shit straight. I mean, gay. Literally, education truly is power. And when you think about and focus on how to move the movement forward more than how to please people, you will feel more comfortable like standing up for the queer community, standing up for yourself, and feeling more confident in that, because like a lot of these things are going to make people uncomfortable. And that's just like, unfortunately, how a movement has to go, right? We can't move a movement forward without ruffling some feathers along the way. How does this apply to speculating on sexuality? Thinking someone is queer based on a trait that queer people recognize as queer is not stereotyping, because especially when queer people do it. Because just because that trait falls into the box of that stereotype does not mean it is not queer flagging, and does not mean that that does not signal to queer people in some way, okay? The whole point is to get rid of them, not to live confined in them. And if we only think about how straight people view that, we are not liberating ourselves. It is our own culture that we can see as gay. And just because other people use that to marginalize us does not mean we need to use that to marginalize ourselves. Intent is also important, and the deliverer of the message is also important. So we're gonna have to recognize, again, nuance, that someone being like, wow, you're so gay for that, and oh my God, do you think he's gay, are two extremely different things. The actual word there is not the problem, right? It's the intent, it's the messenger, it's the intent to harm, and the other is speculating and coming out of positivity and connection to find community. Two different things. Queer flagging sometimes and often falls into these stereotypical behaviors, right? That does not mean we can't pick up on and discuss these flags, and it does not invalidate every other queer expression that is possible for the community, right? So, for example, and again, I'm sure you guys understand this, but like, it's just really important that we remind ourselves and we feel confident in this, because we need to be solid on this to like move our movement forward. Saying that you think a woman who passed by in a Carhartt pants wearing a carabiner, right, maybe wearing a beanie, is a lesbian is not invalid and is not in stereotyping, because homophobes use that to stereotype all lesbians, okay? That's a queer flag. If your intent is being like, oh, that looks like a lesbian outfit, we can't be saying, oh, I shouldn't say that because that's homophobic. You're thinking of how a homophobe would think of that, right? We're still envisioning a society in a homophobe's world. We have to break through that, okay? We cannot use the master's keys to break the master's house, okay? It doesn't mean you think all lesbians dress like that, but some lesbians do, period. On the flip side, we know that queer flags sometimes go against stereotypes, right? When you think about like an ultra femme lesbian or sapphic, right? Sometimes people say that they knew that I was gay because I was just like really femme and like bitchy. I don't know how to explain it, but just like on it, you know, kind of quick. Now that goes against a stereotype, but still a queer flag. Or one of the stereotypes of lesbians is that every lesbian is butch. But again, recognizing that a butch is a lesbian is not stereotyping. But yeah, for example, like a femme wearing, like having like a lot of jewelry on and having like a femicure, that's a queer flag. And it pushes against the stereotype. Still equally a queer flag and still equally authentic. Queer flagging is very valid and is very real. And if you want to hear more about queer flagging, I have an entire episode on it. I think it's episode 3. It's called History of Queer Flagging on my podcast. So go check that out. I talk about different queer flags throughout history, and they're limitless, right? And they evolve with time. And I think it's a really interesting episode, so go check that out. Okay, let's go into like putting these things into action, right? Why and when is it okay to speculate on sexuality? Why? It's important, as I've said before, to recognize and acknowledge queer flags. We should not be erasing these. So if you look up queer flags, a lot of the time on the internet and these sources, they will say, oh, they used to be queer flags, but we don't need those anymore because we're good. Hello? Queer flags are very much still used and are very modern. So just because they're a modern take and we don't need to like have colored bandanas anymore does not mean it's not a queer flag. So don't look to these very like definitioned sources on the internet. I suggest looking to theorists and queer activists for kind of backup, to be completely honest, and support and confidence. We just also don't have a lot of documentation of queer history. So it's not going to be on like the encyclopedia. It's not going to be on like these like history of our nation books, right? So we have to dig deep to find this, and we have to write it ourselves. Okay. We are in the movement currently. Why is it okay to speculate on sexuality? Why? Because queer people are allowed and should recognize other queer people in the wild. And it's also something that we've always done as a community. We've needed to do that based on survival, okay? We have used queer flagging as a community to find other people safely. Perhaps now it's not even necessarily for physical safety, and sometimes it is. And sometimes it's wanting to find community without having to come out. And that's the importance here. Queer people, you hear this all the time on the internet and on TikTok. How can I look gayer as someone that like, as a femme, right? How can I tell people that I'm gay in my outfits? All of these things, all the things in the comments are like jewelry, tattoos, all of these things without having to constantly come out, because the future of our community is not based on, again, making this world for straight people and having to tell straight people all the time, I'm gay, I'm bi, this is my identity. We want to be able to flag these things without having to come out. This kind of emotional labor for straight people. What's the future of our world, right? Your daughter comes home from school, starts dating a girl. You don't say, what? You didn't come out first. You'd be like, oh, that's great. I mean, you should, right? We shouldn't have to label ourselves, and it's great if you do, I personally do, or put a label on ourselves for other people in order to live our life. So I think it's a great act of resistance. So we aren't having to do this, like active labor for every single person we come in contact for our life to constantly come out. Coming out culture is not for gay people. It's for straight people. So when people on the internet say, oh, well, I won't say I will love her if she comes out, when she comes out. It is this assumption that they are straight and have to do something for you to come out. Like, that's what it is. I've come out so many times in my life, it's ridiculous. And I would love if we were in a culture where you just like brought your girlfriend somewhere and then people are like, oh, I guess she's queer in some way, and no one like wonders when the coming out happened. Like, it's a prerequisite in order to be queer and to queer flag, right? So when you go to a lesbian bar, you aren't coming out to every single lesbian in that bar. You are flagging that you're there and you're queer, et cetera, right? So that's kind of what queer flagging is now. It can be used in many different ways. Oftentimes, it is still for people to find queer community in a safe way. But sometimes it's because we aren't adjusting our lives to fit the straight narrative, but we are rather, signaling this to queer people without having to do this work and a statement to make straight people feel better and feel okay about us. Why? It is not up to straight heteronormative society to tell queer people what we can and cannot talk about. That is censorship. If we don't talk about it, it becomes the culture of, again, don't ask, don't tell. If we cannot talk about sexuality unless that person has given us a direct confession, does create this culture in which celebrities or people feel the need and feel more pressure to come out. And that's actually really the outing. So if we don't talk about it, then it's like, don't talk about this shh, until they say something. That is don't ask, don't tell. That is not where we want to go in our future. That is pushing people to feel like they need to come out to straight people. And also the narrative that you guys are constantly pushing on the internet, not y'all, other people, is pushing them to out themselves more than we are pushing them to come out. Right? And also, what is coming out? Queer people view coming out very differently than straight people. Taylor Swift saying that everything that makes me, me, and she says gay pride, that's coming out for us. Okay. When I first came out, I posted a rainbow on my Instagram story and I said, Happy National Bi Awareness Month or something like that, or week. And no one thought I came out because, again, straight people are looking for a confession, a title. I am bi, and queer people do not fit into a straight person's mold. So it is up to queer people to decide if they even want to come out, what coming out is for them, and coming out may not be in a straight person's language. We need to move past coming out culture. We have to. That is the only way our society is going to break past this assumption of people being straight, is this waiting for this confession. It's also this emotional pressure. The pressure of coming out is horrible and insane. I have a liberal family and I was so stressed out about it. We can't be putting this much pressure on people to come out for straight people by saying we can't talk about sexuality or queer flags or something queer in someone's work. It's saying that that's a harmful thing, that you're accusing someone of doing something bad, which makes them feel like they shouldn't come out because they also see all these people that are kind of homophobic on the internet. And then also it's pushing them to be oh fuck, I guess I have to make a fucking statement about this. How is that positive for the community? I could talk about this for so long. It's so crazy. When is it okay to speculate on sexuality? Whenever a queer person does it. A queer person seeing if someone's queer is not stereotyping. It is not problematic. It is not homophobic. Okay? It is finding community. And if you're straight, I would follow a queer person's lead. If you're educated on queer history and spot a queer flag, you're good. Okay? You're saying, oh, I know from learning queer history that Friend of Dorothy was a historically used queer flag. And I know that Taylor Swift just used that. That is totally okay. You're noticing a queer flag. That is important. It's not a bad thing to notice. It's not an accusation. It's not a bad thing. As long as you say it with good intent and period. When we don't attempt to know or ask or pressure someone for their identity, obviously when someone does something really gay, we can call that gay with good intent, right? When not to. And I think there's very specific instances when we shouldn't. And I think when someone is not queer flagging, okay, and you are not queer. So if you're straight and you see a person not queer flagging and you have a reason to believe that they may be closeted out of safety, we just don't need to talk about that on the internet, right? Especially if you're not queer. Okay, but that is very different from when we see a famous person queer flagging. So there's very specific instances where I think use your best judgment. You see a random person walking around the street, which no one's doing this, by the way. You see, you're straight, let's say. You're straight. You see a random person walking down the street. You think that they're gay. And you scream, that person's gay. Or you see someone in high school and you think that they may be gay. But they're maybe closeted and you're straight. You wouldn't tell the whole school you think they're gay. Okay, but that's just common sense. I don't think it's a great thing to do because you're unsure if they could be out and they also are a minor and they also have like they're living with their family. This is best judgment. Again, nuance. Super big difference between like spreading a rumor or saying something that someone is gay that you think may be closeted, that isn't actually queer flagging, versus a famous person queer flagging over and over and over again. These are two very big differences. And I think it's also important to remember people who are closeted, that are protecting themselves from safety, will not intentionally over and over and over again queer flag and align themselves with the queer community out loud. Point blank, period. It is so much more important to focus on pushing past these barriers and focus on the like future of the movement rather than being scared to say something is gay. People that are really outing these closeted people are homophobes. They really are. If you're a queer person and you think someone else is gay, you're not outing them. Okay? If you're trying to find queer community and you're trying to find a partner and you're dating. Okay? If you're a queer person or a straight person, you see a famous person queer flagging, you're not outing them. We have to have that nuance. We have to have that nuance because if we don't, that means we don't talk about gay things unless someone writes a letter to your house. And that is so, so dangerous for the community because the biggest thing in this community is that we are associated with these like dirty, private, secret things. And the only way we're going to move the community forward is if we remove the stigma and we take away the dirtiness of it that homophobes associate with these words. And if we don't keep talking about it, it's only reinforcing what they want to push on us. Why, and then I think we're almost wrapping up, why is speculating, or rather, and when I say speculating, I really just mean talking about sexuality and queer flagging in the LGBTQ community. That's really kind of just the word that homophobes want to use for us, but I thought we might as well just reclaim it. Why is this important? Because if we don't, again, it reinforces coming out culture. We don't want to live in a society in which we're straight or cis until proven otherwise. That's literally horrible, and the whole thing we're trying to get past, okay? Coming out is for straight people, like I said before. Queer people come out all the time and forever, and we're so sick of it. We're literally so sick of it. It is not up to straight people to decide what is it coming out. Also, talking about queer people, queer history and culture is important, and we have the opportunity to educate people. That's why we should like loudly be saying this and standing behind it. And we have the ability to open up people's minds to what queer people look like. I think a lot of the times when people are like, oh, you shouldn't say that that person's queer, that person's not queer, it's because they don't fit into what they think a queer person looks like. I think that's why people are so confused when we call like celebrities gay that like look straight, because they don't look gay to them. So that's another reason why we need to talk about it. Okay, if you really want to get into sexuality theory, I would suggest getting into Michael Foucault. This is someone who like literally changed my life forever. And my professor who had us read Michael Foucault, like just pretty much the opposite of like Freud, okay? He was a gay man, but he didn't really like labels in France. And this is one of my favorite quotes of all time. He says, "In my opinion, as important as it may be, tactically speaking, to say I am homosexual, aka coming out, in a wider strategy, the question of knowing who we are sexually should no longer be posed. It is not then a question of affirming one's sexual identity, but of refusing to allow sexuality, as well as the different forms of sexuality, the right to identify you, the obligation to identify oneself through and by a given type of sexuality must be refused." We have to reject this obligation to come out and identify ourselves for the world. We have to reject it. If you want to come out, that's great, but we can't force people and be like making people reveal themselves in this kind of backwards way in order to like move our society forward. We have to move beyond this. Finally, we're coming to a close, you guys. This is a long episode. I hope you guys aren't sick of me like ranting. My eyes are almost like blinded by the light because I feel like my eyes are twitching because I'm like remembering all the like frustrating comments I've gotten and fueling into this episode. Okay, so I wanted to talk about how to respond when someone says online or in person, but it's probably going to be online. And again, a lot of people say, like don't bother yourself with these conversations. Some of it I think is definitely useless, and like protect your mental health. You do not have to respond to all of these things that someone says to you on the internet, but if you would like to, here's what I would say. And sometimes this is in person too, okay? If someone says, don't speculate, that is the number one comment I get. Number one. Here are all my answers. A, if you're queer, don't let any straight person tell you what you can and can't say. Straight people have no right to attempt to protect queer people from other queer people. How fucking dare you? Literally, how dare you? If someone said, I personally was outed, you can say, I'm so sorry you had that experience, but speculating is not outing. And it's unfortunate when people have those experiences. And I think that's what leads queer people to kind of hate conversations about sexuality. And I understand that and I empathize with that. But the future of getting us past homophobia is not to censor ourselves. And also, I would unfortunately bet that that person was homophobe and did that in malintent. And it wasn't someone being like, hey, are you queer? I'm queer. Can we be friends? Right? Speculating is not outing, is what you can say. You can say, I'm so sorry. Quote, speculating is not outing. Next. Quote, I am educated on queer flags and queer history and know how to recognize when they're being used. That's another comment you can say. You can also say, blank word is not an accusation or a bad word. These are like elementary responses. And like sometimes you'll get people that just like are like swerving to like make you look like a bad person. And if it's becoming that kind of conversation and these nuanced and common sense answers aren't working, I would just leave the conversation. It sucks because I hate when that happens because it makes me feel like I'm losing, but you're not losing. You are removing yourself from stupid people. And my mom would always say, you can't argue with stupid. You cannot argue with stupid. So if they're sounding stupid, stop talking to them. 2 more answers. Quote, this person is a public figure and this is queer flagging. Period. If someone's putting up public art and they are queer flagging, we have the ability to analyze it in our own way. Final answer, quote, people are not straight until proven otherwise. Straight is not the default. All of these things, great answers, okay? But again, put your mental health first. The importance of this episode really, for me, was to make people feel more comfortable talking about sexuality online, even with this huge resistance from people. Because the only way, again, like that we're gonna move forward as a community is to like remove the stigma from talking about it. It's not dirty, it's not bad, it's not gross, okay? I wanted to end with these 2 quotes. Another amazing author is Judith Butler. I actually had the ability to talk with them. My class in college, this is like 2020, which is so scary, 5 years ago. And so we had the ability to talk with Judith and it was amazing. But here are 2 of my favorite quotes. One of them is from, or maybe they're both from Undoing Gender. They do heavy theory. So may not be the best starting point, but I really think pushes you to like look at society differently and not to think about things in a way that's been pushed on us to think about things. So here's the first one. Quote, when we speak about my sexuality or my gender, as we do and as we must, we mean something complicated by it. Neither of these is precisely a possession, but both are to be understood as modes of being dispossessed, ways of being for another, or indeed by virtue of another. Sexuality is not the something that we possess, right? It is this larger thing. Here's the last one. Gay identities work neither to copy nor emulate heterosexuality, but rather to expose heterosexuality as an incessant and panicked imitation of its own naturalized idealization. Panicked imitation. crazy. That heterosexuality is always in the act of elaborating itself is evidence that it is perpetually at risk and that it knows its own possibility of becoming undone. And we are going to make heterosexuality become undone because we are not, what are we not doing? We're not conforming. Heterosexuality makes us feel like we are other and different. Heterosexuality is literally so socialized and it is in constant threat of being undone. And a society based on it is at risk of becoming undone when we talk about it, when we talk about homosexuality, when we talk about gay people, when we talk about things without feeling like we have Big Brother watching over us. And right now, I think we currently don't. I think we still have freedom of speech. So let's use it while we can and don't let internet people make you feel bad or stupid or gross. Okay, that's the end of my episode. Sorry, it was like pretty much an hour rant. I hope you guys enjoyed. I can't believe this is my last episode here at my little set. It was the beginning of my podcast and I'm excited for all the things to come. Yeah, I hope you guys have an amazing week. As always, let me know any like episode ideas you have on YouTube, on Spotify, on TikTok, whatever. Join my Patreon. If you have any rumors you want me to talk about in my next On the Rumor Mill episode, let me know that too, and I will rate it. Bye, guys.